Hello, welcome to another episode of Engineering Our Future podcast. I'm Nicolai here with Luis again. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I'm excited about continue recording these episodes. It's been great to start 2025 kind of on a high note in terms of recording episodes, and I think I took an extended break last year, and just in terms of just being busy and everything. So it's been great to kind of get back to it, and I've been learning a lot and getting just kind of thinking about ideas and topics and having these conversations, and hopefully everyone listening has experienced that as well.
Yeah, I have also enjoyed it. It's been turning into a great habit here. But today I'm really excited to kind of talk about our topic of promotions. What is it? What to expect? Timelines. What does it mean when to get one? All those sorts of things. So I think we're going to try to cover as much as we can in 20 minutes or less.
Yep.
But we might have to revisit this topic just because it's kind of big.
Yep.
There's a lot of moving parts to it. But I guess I just want to maybe lay out just a little about myself first, because this topic could go different ways if you talk to different people, you know? And for me personally, I've never really been one to look for or care about a title, you know? The other day, somebody who didn't know me at our company saw my title on our team's, chatter, the team's personal card there, right? And he says, "Oh, I'm reaching out to you because you're this and this and this and this." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even really even remember that was my actual title. That's just not me." Okay, so I love talking about promotions. I love talking about adding value and KPIs to try to get to that next rung. But I just want everybody to know before we really get started, that's kind of my stance on titles. What about you? Before we dive into that, what's your take on titles?
I totally agree. And I think for me, it's more kind of what I'm doing in terms of just kind of having the responsibilities and like being involved in projects. A lot of times these promotions come with maybe you're involved in like bigger projects or projects that are a little more interesting. And I think that's kind of the thing that I care more about. Just kind of continue to working on projects that are exciting and continue helping out where I can. But I agree. The title means nothing. I mean, I could be the entry level engineer, but if I'm working on really cool projects, just because of my experience, because of my ability to perform well those roles, I think that's kind of the main thing. And I want to start these just by saying kind of the importance of feedback, and that's something I think we talked about before, something we have touched on a lot in the podcast, and something that I always share with people that come to me with advice. But I heard this stat that 30%, you're 30% more likely to get a promotion if you are constantly getting feedback. And I think that's a crazy stat for such a simple thing to do. You can just go to your manager once a month, once a quarter, and just have a 30-minute, 1 hour conversation on what are things that are going well, what are things that you can improve on. And you take that and apply it to your job, you're 30% more likely to get that promotion that if you were just going through the motions and doing nothing. So I don't know where you want to start this conversation, but I think the feedback piece is a big one that I know a lot of people struggle with. I think as engineers, we're afraid to get that direct feedback sometimes in terms of like someone criticizing our work. Like I always feel like we are reviewing someone else's calculations for like an independent design check, or someone else reviewing my calculations, because you're afraid of making those mistakes, and you're afraid of someone else seeing kind of that human side of you. And I think as engineers, we want to be perfect. We want to be doing always our best. So kind of what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, the feedback piece, I didn't hear that stat before, but that is very interesting. I think you touch on a point of perfection, and I just want to kind of clear the air that says that you don't need to be perfect to get promoted. That is not the way to get promoted. I mean, obviously, the value you bring and the responsibilities you hold and the responsibilities that you can then accept, all of those things kind of lead to that next level. I know some people who are entry level, and then 2 years out, they get kind of that first next promotion. It's not necessarily entry level, but maybe it's like a an associate or an intermediate type of promotion. I know some entry levels that just don't really bring the value. They do work. We can count on them to do a project, but it's not necessarily something we can trust them to kind of do on their own. And it takes them a few extra years to kind of get to those certain key performance indicators and responsibilities that are ready for that next promotion. So everybody's also on a different timeline, which is another thing. So if you see your peers moving up or getting these promotions, doesn't necessarily mean that like you're not good enough or anything for the promotion, but maybe we need to look at what are those things that you need to be hitting. I have a few team members that are very, very ambitious and very wanting to climb the ladder, not the corporate ladder, but they are excited about bringing additional value to projects. They're excited about serving clients well. And so for me, I love working with them because they will come to my monthly meetings and we'll go over, okay, these are those tasks that the next level is responsible for. These are those indicators and key results that the next promotion is responsible for. Um, what can you start to do on those, and how can we put you into projects or into positions that allow you to work on those towards it? Because I don't necessarily believe in giving somebody a promotion and then hoping they can do all those things. I want to start to see some of those things, and not all of them. I'm not looking for them to totally fulfill all of those KPIs for the next promotion piece. But if they can hit 6 out of 10, that is so much easier to be like, yep, we're ready for that next piece. But I find a lot of young people don't really know what those KPIs are. Has anybody kind of sat down with you in your past, in your history, and kind of said, all right, Luis, this is your responsibility right now, but to get to the next step, these are the 5 things that you really should be doing. Are you even clear on that?
So I just started this new role, like we talked about kind of early in this, kind of going back to the podcast. So I haven't like sat down and talked about some of these specific things, but we have had this conversation like, hey, if you want to become a project manager or a task lead or some of these different names that again mean very little things sometimes. Here are some of the things that we're kind of expecting, like make sure you are diverse in the projects we handle, make sure you have a solid technical base, which I think it's kind of givens as you start progressing in your career. But I'm sure as I kind of start getting more comfortable, again, we are here in February, so 6 month, 7 mark for me here at Jacob. So as we get maybe into that year, I think that's kind of when I've transitioned roles a few times, and that's kind of where I start seeing where I feel comfortable kind of doing the projects. I know where things are. I know what a calculation set may look like. I start understanding what a drawing set look like. So I think that for me has been kind of the turning point. And I think once we start approaching that, I think we're going to have more specific conversations. At previous
Okay.
roles, I think it was clear, but I've often felt I wasn't put in the position to gain those skills. And they were sometimes
Mm.
subjective, and it wasn't like clear to me when I could achieve those, if that makes sense. I think that's one of the biggest things in
Yeah.
terms of like setting goals. Like, we gotta make sure these are clear, make sure they are, you can quantify them at times. A lot of things were subjective, so it changes from manager to manager and how you see them, and like making sure someone is ready. Um, so I think that's kind of one of the things that I've struggled with in the past, is kind of maybe that subjectivity of like, here are the KPIs. We should be clear. We should be specific in some of these things that we need to achieve to get there. And I think more importantly, what you were saying is just kind of putting the people into those positions, seeing how they perform, seeing if they're ready. I think that's even more important than just kind of the specifics of all these target metrics to get there. Is someone able to get into that position and lead a group of engineers through a task and make sure they're organized, make sure they're hitting all the milestones, and kind of almost like putting them in a position to succeed, while kind of training them to be in that position. I think there needs to be a transition period where you're kind of put in that position, you're coaches through that before you kind of get into that promotion. Like you were saying, sometimes
Hmm.
people wait, managers wait too long to put people in those positions because they don't think they're ready, but they have never really been in those positions. So it's kind of hard to quantify that. And I think this subjectivity sometimes I struggle with personally. I don't know what has been your
Yeah.
experience from. Again, I think you've been in both sides. Someone that is gotten promotions and work for someone that can give you a promotion, and then you are now a people leader, a manager, someone that can give promotions and are managing a group of people. So very curious to hear your perspective on kind of both sides of that coin.
I don't even know where to start, but the first thing that popped into my head was one of my early promotions. I joined a company and I loved my boss. He was so great. And then he moved about 3 years after I joined, and he went to go own a different company, which I ended up following him later. But there was, about a 2 year gap or year and a half gap there. He was, kind of pumping me up that, my next thing as an early career was, to get my PE. And once I can have my PE, now I have a little bit more responsibility on some projects as a roadway designer, not a roadway lead or anything like that, not a design lead, but just a roadway engineer. Just a little bump up, maybe doing a little bit more of the modeling and stuff like that. So I was really excited for that opportunity. I passed the test, and then when I finally got my number, I went to my then new boss at the time, and he could not care less, and it crushed me a little bit. I was just so excited, and I was expecting the raise that they had kind of not promised but just shared that I was going to get, and I just wanted him to acknowledge it. And he was just like, yeah, fine, whatever, I'll send an email out to the whole company and congratulate you. But I had to like fight for that promotion or that new title or whatever it was. So it just that was kind of a bummer. But then I've had other areas where, I've moved up a rung, but didn't even know that I had moved up a rung. Maybe I was going from a roadway lead to a design lead. And so you're not just taking care of your roadway staff and your roadway coordination, all of that, but you were really making sure everybody was communicating together and looking for those interdisciplinary issues and conflicts, and organizing all of the other engineers, and I just kind of moved into that without ever having kind of a clear ta-da, you've made it, it just happened. Then I just kept going with it. So I would do that. I think when you start to get to kind of the PM role or the people leader role, or maybe you move into sales, stuff like that, I feel like there's a little bit more of like a cleaner cut of, okay, now here's your responsibilities. But like you were saying, you kind of have to get trained into it. And I think a lot of what you were saying was really applicable to some of the people leaders on how they can better interact and share and put their people into good positions. But if you're a young person right now who's ambitious and you're almost feeling a little held back, or you're not getting those opportunities, well, you can't control your manager. Like, you can't make them do certain things, but you can do things. And maybe you go to him or her and say, "Hey, I really am excited about that next rung or that next promotion, that next responsibility. Can you just help me lay out what it's going to take to get there? And I would like to just start talking about these things a little bit more proactively." I can't imagine any boss, except maybe the boss that didn't want to announce I got my PE. But I can't imagine any other boss that would like be upset that their employee wanted to do that. As somebody who actually has a number of people on my team that are very good like that, I think my advice would be like, get excited. Let's go after it. Let's have high energy, but definitely understand realistic expectations. Sometimes the energy can be a little bit much, and I'm like, oh, I hate to burst your bubble, but just because you become a PE does not automatically mean, you have 4 years of experience and all of a sudden you're going to be a project manager winning projects and all these other things. And I've had people like that on my team where, they're so excited about the PE, and I'm so excited for them, but the realistic expectation, you're going to get that PE, and now you're just going to have maybe a little bit more responsibility on your designs. But until you can win projects and put your name on a proposal and show your project history and win a project that way, I don't see how you're a true project manager if you can't do that. If you can't bring in that work, that's kind of I had an old boss that kind of shared that that was his description of project manager, and I just kind of took it from there, and I liked it. Now you can be a task manager, maybe a project manager wins the work, and they kind of allow you to kind of run it behind the scenes and stuff like that. Great, and that gives you the training, and that kind of gives you some of the behind the scenes looks of what that next rung is and some of the responsibilities. But yeah, I think realistic expectations, and I'm not trying to pull people down or kind of like a wah wah, like, oh, this is not exciting. It really is exciting, but let's try to have some realistic expectations, but then maybe add a few stretch goals on there. That I think is just more reality. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
yeah. Getting the PE, I mean, it's a big milestone, like you said. I mean,
Yeah.
I worked hard on that for a year, kind of preparing for it. Like I said, I think I posted an episode right after I took it, probably like the week after I took it. And the biggest takeaway was, if I pass or not, it's fine. Like, I already study hard. I felt like I became a better engineer just by going through the process of diving deep in some of these things that maybe I wasn't as familiar as I should have been. I already kind of quote unquote won the game of being an engineer at that point. Like, I study hard, I prepare for it. If pass it or not, like, that's just trivial at this point. So I'll try to link that before. I think this has been one of the most popular episodes I've put out, just because I think a lot of people resonated with it. But like you said, like, getting the PA is not like an automatic switch. Now you're a PM. Now you can do all these things. You're still the same person you were the day before you took it, the day you took it, the day after you took it, if you pass it or not. I think on the long run is kind of where you're able to do more things with that PE. Like, if you lean into, now I'm a professional engineer. Now I have a little more responsibility. Like, the things that I'm doing are critical to the project. Like, I cannot just like hope that everything will be fine. Now you're an engineer. You're like, you have the ethical responsibility to make sure the project is safe and everything is going well. Like, you have that extra responsibility when you get the PE. And when you start embracing that, I think that's when your manager, your supervisor, your teammates start seeing that, okay, he's going in the right way to become a manager, to become a people leader, to become that person, that promotion that we want to get. But like you said, there is no really easy way to get there. Like, there is no like a magic wand that you just wave and let's say now you're promoted. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes you don't even know you're progressing, but you are, because you're working hard. You have your goals, you have your expectations, and communicating that with your supervisor, I think, is critical a lot of the times, and make sure you're on the same page. Like you said, if you want to become a project manager, like, talking about that with your manager and saying, I want to become a project manager, a task lead, and having them guide you through that process, make sure they are aware of some of the things some of the skills that maybe you are lacking that need to be reinforced. I think that's critical. And I think that's something that my current supervisor told me, I think a month into I started my job. Like, here's where you are now. Like, you'll be doing great. Like, I've heard good things. If you want to become a task lead or project manager, here are some of the things that we can do to get you there. Obviously, it was early on into me starting and whatnot, but here are some of the things that you can do right now to get you there, and it will help you to get there. And that was super reassuring and making sure that I had a path forward more than anything. Like, I wasn't just gonna be
Mm.
designing bridges and just kind of send calculations off and just be done with it. But I had a path forward to some of the things that I like. Talking with clients, talking with people, again, just kind of having more conversations and whatnot. I think that's something that I value a lot. What are your thoughts on kind of those expectations and where some people may struggle with, and maybe some of the like just kind of common pitfalls that you've seen in terms of, again, not seeking the feedback, or people just kind of being too much in their bubble and not networking and finding new skills and things that they can bring from the outside into their role. Like, as again, I think we're big in just volunteering with ASCE. We're big into
Hmm.
um, bettering ourselves in terms of just reading, getting new skills, and all that stuff. Like, what are some of the common mistakes you see people maybe struggling to do that, or thinking it's maybe not even important?
Man, that's another episode. But let me share three conversations I've had just like this week, and so that'll touch on three topics. One, the the thought that they can just show up and then that's going to be enough for them to move on and get promoted and move on in their career. I mean, we need. I mean, I don't know about you, but there's a lot of groups that are just shorthanded, you know. And when I look at other companies, there's just not enough people out there. We want a good work-life balance, and that's really important. But even if the projects allowed a good work-life balance, I've never met somebody who becomes an expert on something in a 40-hour week scenario, you know? And so, I mean, people who are open roads experts, they do that at like their lunch break or in the evenings, or they just jump watch YouTube videos on the weekend. Like they do the extra effort that they're not getting paid for necessarily, you know, to do that effort, but they do it because they love it, they're passionate about it, it's something they want to become an expert on and be seen as an expert on, and that drives them. But if you think that you can just come in and all right, I'm just going to learn everything I can within these 40 hours that I have allotted to me, it just doesn't really work like that. Uh, Another thing, and it wasn't necessarily related to promotions, but another conversation I had recently was a young person was kind of sharing with me that they felt that they were getting a little bit of a burnout and that they were a little frustrated that they weren't getting support. And I said, well, have you asked for support? And they're like, well, they should see me. They should see how much I'm working. And I wish that was the case. You know, I wish that his manager would see that he's working till 9, 10 p.m. every night, but his manager logs off at 5. So he's not going to see that. And so taking that piece and kind of applying it to promotions is I want to say our managers are great. All managers are great and supervisors are great, but sometimes they're just so busy that they can't really see everything going on around them. So it is a little bit on you to take that step and talk to them about it. Just like you were saying, you know, you were kind of sharing like this is what I want, and then you create that plan with your manager. But you need to be visible with them. You need to be talking to them and asking for that feedback and then taking that feedback and actually applying it, not arguing with them like, oh, well, no, that's not true because this happened. Just take this feedback and find a way to improve it. So I would take that conversation and apply it to take a proactive approach because as much as I wish all supervisors saw those things, sometimes we do need a little prompting or conversations or reminders. Okay. Shoot, now I can't remember what the third one was, but it was a good one. Okay. So the realistic expectations. I kind of touched on it a little bit before, but you know, the timeline of things and just understanding things take time. And I love the energy of certain people, but then they just don't have that realistic understanding of what is actually going to happen, what is actually going to change, what is it actually going to take to kind of put your title as this thing. And so sit down with that manager and have that conversation of, okay, what are these things, the checklist that I need to do here at Jacobs, and I'm sure many other companies out there have, you know, different categories of employment, you know, or different bands or whatever titles. And so we have really great outline of, okay, if you're entry level, these are the expectations. If you're, you know, the next level, these are the expectations, and all the way up. It was just like, you know, more hands-on, less hands-on, more expertise, less expertise, all these other things. But it's great for, you know, the general public or the general person in the company. So what we've been doing as our team is we've been kind of sitting down together and kind of creating how can we like make it specific for roadway, like become an expert in what software, and then what does that even look like, or hands off, what does that really look like, or mentoring others, you know, or do we have somebody assigned to you, or are you just kind of like somebody that people ask questions to? You know, we were trying to make it very specific and make it clear, because I want people to know if they want to go from A to B, this is exactly what they need to do. So we can go way on and on. I know we're over the 20-minute mark here, but yeah, there's so many things. Let's definitely cover the promotions on another episode, and maybe we go deeper on that last question you asked.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it, and I think that's a great kind of summary to end it. Just again, make sure you're getting the feedback. Make sure you're asking for kind of that constant feedback. And like you said at the end, there is super important just to be noticed. I think as engineers, we struggle. Just we're kind of in our own bubble. We do our calculations and say, I did some great work. Someone is going to see it. They're going to think I'm going to great work, and I'm just going to get promoted. A lot of times, obviously, that's not the case. We need to vouch for ourselves, and we need to kind of have these conversations with our manager, with our teammates at times. Something I found useful is just kind of having regular check-ins. Maybe you're not really talking for an hour. Maybe you just kind of chat someone like, hey, this is some of these I'm working on, especially if you're working directly with someone. Here's what's on my plate. Like, what should I prioritize? Like, keep them involved in kind of what you're working on. And I think that naturally accentuates that what are you doing, and maybe you finish a project, you have a debrief, like what are some of the things I did well, some of the things I didn't. I think we kind of come back to that communication piece of it and that feedback piece of it, that it's super important and something that I have leaned heavy on in the past. And I think as engineers we struggle, and I still struggle a lot of times, but it's just super important. I don't know if you have any last thoughts, anything that you want to share kind of to end the episode.
I think you summarized it very well. I think, if there's one thing somebody can do, would just reach out to their supervisor and just kind of share some of their aspirations. Mm-hmm. And maybe you're sitting here and you're like, I don't even know what's next. Well, ask your boss. Ask him, hey, this is what I am, but what could a career path look like? Yep. And have them share that with timelines, hopefully. And again, not every timeline applies to the same person. A 7-year experience, this person versus this person, very different, stories between the two and opportunities that they got. But just have him or her share like a general explanation of it, and then kind of say, oh, okay, that sounds good. Now let's create a plan to how I get there. But this was a fun episode. We definitely need to talk about this more. I already have more things in my head to share, so let's do it again soon.
Yeah, we'll definitely do a follow-up on that. If you enjoyed this conversation of the Engineering Future podcast, you're going to love the content we have over our newsletter at luisfelipeduque.com/newsletter. Every episode is packed with a lot of information, links, and if you enjoyed this episode, If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, you're going to love the content we have over our newsletter. Every issue comes packed with information about the episode that we recorded, giving you detailed action items as well as just reflection on some of the things that you could apply in your career, in your life. And I always enjoy sitting down on a Sunday, Saturday sometimes, and writing down each newsletter. Comes packed with a lot of information, a lot of links, a lot of great lessons and knowledge that we share both in the podcast, but I'll try to go a little deeper into that connection. So if you are interested in that at all, go to luisfelipeduque.com/newsletter. All the information is there. I'm excited for the podcast and where it's going. So I want you to know about that resource as well. Nicolai and I put a lot of effort in the podcast, and we're enjoying the conversations. And as well, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, go to the link in the description below or luisfelipeduque.com/contact, and let's connect. We're happy to provide you with all the information you need, and always excited to have that conversation as well. Thank you, Jack Winters, for the music. And as always, let's continue engineering our future.